Yeah, we've recently finished a piece of work with Hewlett-Packard, which is a survey of 500 executives across a number of industries, and it's looking at about expectations about corporate IT, and really looking at the issue of consumerization of IT with devices like the iPad and other tablet computers appearing. We're trying to determine what kind of impact that's having on executives in the workplace in terms of what they're expecting from corporate IT, and whether IT departments are able to deliver on that, whether there's an expectations gap, and also whether IT projects themselves are still meeting targets based on this consumerization trend and the pressures that it's creating, and also on the fact that I think a lot of corporate IT projects are being executed much more quickly these days than they used to be. So we've conducted the survey in the EMEA region. As I say, we spoke to about 500 people. We had 20 industries represented. About half the people who responded were at the C-level, and the rest were drawn from lower levels of the organisations that we spoke to. About a quarter of them came from the IT function, and the rest from other departments within the company. And I think we've been able to dispel a few myths perhaps that were circulating about consumerisation and about whether IT projects really are delivering or not delivering. And we've put those into a report which is available on Hewlett-Packard's website and the Economist Intelligence Unit's website, which digests the findings and aims to pull some conclusions out from them. There were quite a few surprises actually within the findings. I think we came at this from the perspective of, there was a perception that there's a kind of generation gap, I think, that so-called Generation Y workers, and by that I mean people who were born from the late 1970s onwards, are much more confident and comfortable using technology. They've grown up with applications like social networking. They're very happy using iPads and tablet computers. So I think there was an expectation perhaps that respondents would say people who fit within those particular age groups were more comfortable using technology and were more expert in technology. And actually what happened was the opposite in many respects. We had more people saying that senior management and senior managers had expertise in technology, and fewer people saying that lower level workers had that sort of same level of expertise. And it's those low level workers, I think, where you'll find a lot of the Generation Y people, obviously because they're younger. So that in itself was surprising. I think the other surprise was the fact that IT projects are really seen as delivering the goods. I think there's a feeling in the wider world that IT projects often overrun, they don't meet targets, they cost too much, and there's a lot of negative publicity about that. And I think a lot of this comes from one or two high-profile cases which have received a lot of media attention, such as in the UK, for instance, a project to digitise patient records within the National Health Service. In actual fact, respondents were saying to us that they're pretty happy with the way that IT projects have been run, and generally speaking they do meet targets, they do help to increase efficiency within companies. I think the important thing is that most IT projects are actually quite small and they don't receive this kind of media focus as the sort of NHS style projects. So that was a good finding as well. I think perhaps the biggest concern of all was this notion of an expectations gap between businesses and customers. There was a feeling in some cases that customers had greater technology expertise, or certainly their understanding of technology was outpacing that of the firms that we incorporated within the survey. And certainly when we looked at poorly performing firms, so that's companies that are reporting negative profit growth or static profits, there was a much bigger concern about customers' technology expertise outpacing their own. And I think that's obviously a bit of an issue. If your customers are seen or perceived as having greater technology expertise than you, then I think that's something that companies need to be worried about. There's a risk, obviously, that customers could gravitate towards rivals if they feel that they're becoming more sort of expert in this area, particularly in certain industries like the mobile handset industry, perhaps, where we've seen Nokia losing some ground to the likes of Apple and Google in recent years, which are obviously companies that didn't have a presence in that area at all when we go back 5-10 years. Yeah, I mean, I think the issue of consumerization is the big one really here. There's been quite a bit of discussion at the conference about consumerization, about workers taking iPads and taking other devices that they use at home into the office and expecting to be able to use those. And this is creating a lot of concern among CIOs generally in IT departments because of issues to do with things like security and compliance. They don't want to have to manage all these devices, and they don't want workers when they leave the company taking these devices with them and not being able to wipe the information on those devices very easily. So I think that's a bit of a headache for CIOs. But I think one thing that the survey brought out was the fact that consumerization is also an opportunity for CIOs in many respects. If you give people more freedom to use the devices and the tools they want, then there's a payoff in terms of productivity. People are often more willing to work during unsocial hours. They're often more willing to work at weekends. So I think there's a trade-off there, certainly. And I think a lot of the attention that's been focused on consumerization and on technology democracy, if you like, in the last few months is perhaps misplaced. I think there are perhaps bigger concerns for CIOs than those issues which have generated a lot of attention. It does, yeah. The issue of security is one that is obviously a bit of a headache for CIOs, and certainly when we look at consumerization and the idea that people want to bring their own devices into work and they want to use applications that they've been using in the evenings at home. I think this is a real challenge for IT in terms of getting to grips with that. There are steps being taken in that area. Some executives that we've spoken to are saying that they're actually encouraging the use of iPad computers. They're rolling those out to their staff, or they're encouraging people to use personal devices for work use. And I think there's an appreciation that if the security concerns and the compliance issues can be overcome, there will be some benefits to be had in terms of productivity. Well, we did ask survey respondents what they expected in the next 3 years in terms of where innovation would come from, and most people who responded said that they still expected the CIO and the IT department to lead innovation. A very similar percentage saying that they expected IT to take the lead in that area, as is happening today. And I think that's very interesting, and it's very encouraging for IT departments. It kind of shows that there's a level of confidence within the CIO function and the IT department. I think the issue for CIOs and for people involved in IT is about managing expectations. I think younger generations, Generation Y as we call it, sometimes feel that innovation can happen at the pace in businesses that it's happening in the consumer world. They see what's happening with companies like Google and Facebook, and they expect that the organisation they work for can do miraculous things at the same kind of pace, and sometimes that's not possible. I think CIOs need to emphasise that some of these things can be beyond the budget and the scope of internal IT departments.